Working with female leaders inspired the creation of the Women in Leadership series, a project close to our heart aimed at creating a vibrant community of innovators, scientists, and changemakers. While we may not be able to address every challenge, we hope to offer a beacon of inspiration, insights, and motivation for women. We have partnered with some of the most incredible women leaders who are eager to share their stories, their successes, and their struggles. These women are pioneers in their fields, breaking barriers and paving the way for future generations. Thank you for joining us on this journey.
But maybe just to start, I'd love for you to just introduce yourself and just walk me briefly through your career journey and just your evolution of your leadership.
Yeah, wonderful. First of all, it's great to be talking with you today. And again, talking with a former colleague and friend as well. So I'm Molly McGinniss. A little bit of my career journey, I started as a clinical genetic counselor. In college, I was really interested in pursuing that clinical degree. Always imagined myself working with patients, came out of that graduate program, worked directly with patients at both a academic medical center and kind of a private medical center, had experience with pediatric, prenatal, adult patients, really kind of that whole spectrum.
The entire
And
spectrum.
then, after about 6.5 years or so, was really feeling this pull to do something different. I was feeling a little burnt out with working with patients every day in a pretty high demand clinic, and started to kind of explore different opportunities and ended up landing at Illumina at this position where I was working in market development. And I was really able to utilize my clinical background, but really in a new way, talking with kind of a bigger variety of stakeholders, community members. And then that has kind of led me to my role at Genome Medical, where I primarily work in kind of a consulting role. So I get to work with a wide variety of customers like pharma companies, labs, healthcare systems who are thinking about implementing genomic solutions. So I never would have expected my journey to where I am now or why I would have made those decisions, but it has felt very organic, and I kind of leaned on kind of going with my gut and kind of what felt right when I took kind of new leaps.
That's amazing. And looking back in terms of sort of what inspired you to make the transitions that you did and take on the leadership roles that you did, what would you say was the catalyst for those decisions?
Yeah, I mean, I think behind all of the moves, it was more about curiosity, right? It was wanting more,
Mhm.
seeing that there was maybe a change or an evolution in the genomics industry that I wanted to be a part of. And then part of it too was also really challenging myself. I felt like I work best in areas where I'm really pushing myself outside of comfort zones and really trying new things that I may not know how to do, but I want to learn to do those. So I think it's kind of both of those where I start to kind of feel that itch, and
Yeah,
I see I want to kind of push myself in a different way.
I love that. Curiosity and the ability to challenge yourself. That's so important. I love that. And I guess when you look at your career transition as you were moving from the clinical space towards the industry and sort of the evolution of those roles, would you say that at any point you've encountered challenges during that progression that may be uniquely specific to women in those leadership positions?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely been multiple times that have come up. I mean, I think one of the most tangible examples I can think about is obviously having to take time away from my career during a maternity leave and not knowing really how to handle that
Mhm.
and think about how do I prepare to leave? How do I prepare to return? I think looking back, it would have been nice for me to, have more examples from people who have done that successfully. I think I just by osmosis looked at other people around me and kind of tried to see what they did. But that was something is, certainly unique, I think, when we think about women in leadership roles. And, it really forced me to think about how do you set healthy boundaries when it comes to kind of work and life, goal setting, really thinking about like minimalistic, kind of realistic goals that are achievable. And then thinking about ways that, you can kind of delegate. And so I think that period was, challenging, but it also really forced me to kind of rethink what your priorities are, and how to transition back. And obviously I know, men take maternity leave and leave away, as well, which is becoming much more commonplace, which is really nice. But I think just that forced time away, really kind of made me think differently about my career and what I was maybe willing to kind of put up with and what I wanted to, say something about if I wanted something to change.
That's so important. And that's such a great example and point to suggest if you had other examples at that time that you could look at that could serve as inspiration or motivation or what to do or what not to do. And I guess reflecting back on that in terms of lessons learned and how do you prioritize the work-life balance now versus maybe back then? And what would you have done differently, maybe?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's so hard, right? When you look back because you realize I'm in a different place than I was, 5, 6, 7 years
Sure.
ago. And so I think part of it is just acknowledging that there's never going to be this perfect balance of work and life. And it's not going to be this perfect balance on a day or a weekly time frame. It's going to ebb and flow. And so I think just one acknowledging, right? Like that it may be hard and there may be periods where you have a higher workload or you're going to have higher demands from your family, that is really helpful to kind of start with. And then two, I would say, I just kind of focus on, again, really feeling gratitude a lot in those moments of I'm really lucky to have a career where I like what I do and who I work with and what I'm doing. And I think sometimes that pushes me through when you realize, you know what, I have the flexibility that I need to take time with my children or with my family. And that might mean I have to spend extra time on the evenings or the weekends. But sometimes focusing on I'm lucky and I get to do this, not I have to do this, that helps me through those days when you have higher demands. But yeah, and then I think just looking at other women who have successfully navigated having families and watching their careers. I think as much as you can talk to others and normalize situations and getting tips and tricks can be really helpful so you don't really feel alone in those moments because certainly you're not, right? There's millions of other people who are dealing with these types of kind of challenges.
You brought up so many great points, and I appreciate you saying taking the time to be grateful and recognizing and switching that mindset from have to I get to understanding that there is no sort of end goal that people need to or have to wait for to realize their gratitude or something like that because it's always escapes us. It's always inevitable. And I talk that a lot about that so much with my clients in terms of who are in career transition or looking for that promotion is to find the now and focus on how do we be grateful in the moment. And I'm so glad you touched on that. And
Yeah, I would say that I think that's a great point, right? And it's about celebrating those small wins as well that can be really, really helpful, not only for you, but for a team. Because sometimes when you have these, large and looming projects and partnerships over time, it can be hard and exhausting. So finding those like mini milestones to celebrate whatever can kind of push you through, is helpful. I know I work that way. That feels very rewarding to me. May not work for others, but it's one little hack.
no, I love that. That's perfect. And I guess when you look back at your career, or you look at your career, do you think that there's maybe one or a couple of sort of aha moments where, and what are they? Whether it's recognizing your own strength or recognizing that you have the ability or something that was meaningful to you when you reflect on your leadership journey?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think, when I look back at kind of my career over time, like I mentioned, I didn't really have a huge plan for what I didn't always have a huge plan. If you asked me 5, 10 years ago, what's your, goal in a year, your 5-year goal, your 10-year goal,
Yeah.
you hear that a lot.
Oh, yeah.
I think I again led with a lot of my gut sense and intuition. But I also really early on tried to focus on my strengths. I think when you are in situations where you're feeling like it's hard to compare yourself with others, or I don't have these skills, or I don't have this background or this degree, it can be really disheartening. But I really tried to lean into focusing on my strengths and really leading with my strengths. And then in those areas where I felt like I wanted to challenge myself, that's where there was that opportunity to really gain kind of new skills over time. And so I think looking back, I did tend to say yes to a lot of things at first, which was necessary for me to push myself and challenge myself. There were periods where you say yes too much, and then you realize you're overwhelmed and overloaded and you need to pull back. And I think there's going to be this ebb and flow over time in your career. And so I think, again, for me, a lot of the aha was saying yes to a lot of things. When I moved to industry, didn't feel like I really belonged in that place. I recognized I needed to learn more. So I said yes to everything. Any new volunteer opportunity, a new leadership, new opportunity at work, join this committee purposely because I wanted to figure out what I enjoyed, what I didn't enjoy, what did I do well. And then over time, I've been able to kind of hone that down.
Mhm.
So, there's probably more productive ways to do that without overwhelming your calendar. But for me, it was helpful.
It's so, I love these conversations because we've done a number of these, and I'm already we're still in single digits, but I'm already seeing trends between the women leaders that I speak to. And one of it is that every single one that I've spoken to has said that they've always said yes to opportunities and
Mm,
challenges. And it's so interesting to me because that's what I imagined going into this, is that there are going to be themes that we're going to uncover and speak into female leaders, because there's something innately amazing that sort of everybody has their strengths, weaknesses, but there are certain characteristics that we're going to find time and time again. And this is one of them that keep us coming up, which I think is so interesting.
yeah, I love that you're kind of hearing that. And I think that's something I've seen when I've seen other women leaders that I am really impressed with and motivate me when I look at them. It's kind of this level of, grit that they have as well, right? It's like sticking with something, even though it's hard. And it's going to take you a while to get there. Like you see these women doing these, staying up late, working on
Yeah.
something, doing every little bit of a project, and really recognizing the level of like passion and perseverance they bring to things. And so I think part of that is because you said yes to things and you're challenging yourself and you're putting yourself into these kind of uncomfortable situations, hoping that you'll be able to kind of see things through, which can be very rewarding.
Of course. Now, I know I'm being very cognizant of time to make sure that I will give you your time back. So I guess with that, I just have maybe one last question, if that's okay, which I'm going to make a two-part. Uh,
Sounds great.
One is, as you look forward and you've been working with amazing mentors, I'm sure throughout your career, are there sort of trends that you're observed in the industry, sort of moving forward, looking ahead, and some of the changes that you've seen around leadership or how you're approaching things now? And the second aspect of that is that if you were to give yourself, when you were maybe 20, advice, what would that be?
Oh, yeah, great questions. Okay, so to start with your first one, I think when you think about some of the kind of emerging trends in leadership, they think there's two that really come to mind.
Mhm.
One is, you're seeing a lot more vulnerability from
Mm.
leaders that I'm working with, like recognizing that it's okay for leaders to open up about, the challenges that you've had in the past. Um, challenges you might be having on a day-to-day basis. I think that level of vulnerability and being really humble in those approaches is really helpful for kind of others on your team. And I think I've seen that a lot in organizations and individuals I've worked with. And then number two is I think there is this trend around increased transparency around business decisions, financial goals of an organization, right? Where before, sometimes you'd feel like you were in the dark about why decisions were being made, but I'm seeing this trend towards really wanting kind of a larger approach from an organization to really understand those decisions and feel like they know what's happening, they're influential. And I think those are great positive things to move forward on because it increases kind of collaboration and ownership within a company and helps kind of motivate people when there are a lot of challenging times. There's a lot of uncertainty that you can have, right, when you're working for a company. So to feel like you can be a part of those decisions or at least know what's happening can be very helpful during uncertainty.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and then now I'm forgetting your second question. So your second question, remind me.
Your second question is advice that you would give to your younger self at 20 as you're just starting out.
Oh my gosh. So much advice I would give to myself. I mean, I think the biggest thing I would think about is it's something that I always tell others, people kind of new to, genetic counseling, people new to industry, is really the importance of mentorship and really surrounding yourself with mentors that you can go to and can advise you on certain challenges and have a really formal relationship there. And that is something I probably wished I would have done earlier. I think I did that more organically, more ad hoc, but I think having a more intentional discussion with a mentor and really thinking a little bit more about why you're doing certain things, getting advice, I think that can be very helpful and potentially can help with maybe some of the burnout, right? If you're saying yes to everything, there needs to be some level of prioritization. So I think that ability, and people are always willing to say, yes, of course, I'd love to talk with you and give you some advice, right? People are always wanting to do that. So something I always try to tell others, but I don't always practice what I preach.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. It's been amazing. Thank you for sharing your journey, lessons, and I'm hoping, of course, it's going to be inspirational and motivational for so many. Thank you.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for having me. And I'm looking forward to hearing everyone else's words and kind of opening some insights around kind of leadership and the evolution of women in careers.
Perfect.